Hi, welcome to Chad Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming to my channel. I appreciate you visiting. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and leaving a comment, that'd be great. Helps to get my channel promoted, so thank you very much in advance for that. I have an old friend who was actually one of my bosses years ago who's asked me to make a piece for his wife. And so I thought if I'm going to make this as a contract piece, I might as well film it. So today I'm going to make a 3-stone Larimar pendant of a custom design, and I think I'm going to put a hinge on the bail, and so I think it'll turn out pretty, but we'll see how it goes. Before we get started, I wanted to thank my YouTube subscribers. We're getting close to 5,000 pretty soon here. Thank you for your support. I appreciate you, telling other people about me and stuff like that. I think that's been a big help in growing my channel, so thank you for that. Thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. You guys are paying for my premium content, and for that I will be forever grateful. Thank you so much. I enjoy that community over there, and I hope they're having as much fun as I am. So, well, let's get back to the project. Let's get started. Okay, so let's get started making some bezels here. So I'm going to go ahead and probably make one bezel on camera, and then I'll do the other two off camera so you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over again. This is 3/16 inch fine silver bezel. This is 26 gauge. It's a little thicker than some, and I like that. When I'm making a bezel, I usually make them into kind of a square or a rectangle, or an angular shape. It's easier to solder them together nicely, I think. If you've never seen one of my videos before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, and I use a flux called My-T-Flux. It's a spray-on. So I'm going to cut a little bit of hard solder here. If you haven't seen my videos before and you're interested in metal smithing, you should definitely check out some other ones. I'm getting pretty close to 200 videos now, so there's quite a bit of content there. And you should subscribe to my channel. That way you know when I release a new one, which is typically on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. This one I'm actually doing in advance because I have a show this weekend. So this one will be released while I'm at the show. It's hard to get ahead when you're doing 3 videos a week. Try to get an extra one in the can, so to speak, is pretty hard sometimes. If you can, always try and position the solder joint on the, on a longer, straighter side if you can. That way you don't have to bend it quite as far. It's always a little stiffer on the solder joint. Okay, the change in plans that I'm going to make here. The initial version that I made had sheet on the back here, and I didn't like the way it came out because it's difficult to get a good, really good polish in between the stones like that. And so it looked a little sloppy to me. Hinge came out well and everything, so we'll try and recreate that again. but I didn't like that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder these pointing inwards to a circle of square wire. That I haven't decided whether I'm going to put the balls in there. I might project them inwards. We'll see. We'll at least get the bezels soldered in there and take a look at it and see how it looks. So let's put a bottom on this guy. I think I'll be okay if I just use 26 on this. Use 26 for most bezels if it's not going to, be a real structural issue. You always want to make sure your sheet is really flat when you do this. Bezel this size, 3 or 4 of these should be plenty. Do 3 big ones and a little one. Just making sure they're touching the edges. Should go around completely at least twice to make sure I get a seam all the way around. I can just trim this off for this one. I'm just going to file that flush. Okay, so I'm going to make the other 2 and then I'll come back and we'll start doing something with them. I'm going to position them kind of like this, and then I took some 14 gauge square wire and I'm going to make a little circle. So I kind of pre-bent it around to get a basic idea how big it needs to be, and I'll cut it off and then we'll solder that closed. So square wire has a tendency, when you bend it, it has a tendency to twist sideways, so you're going to have to go back and do some corrections to these kind of things in order to get them to lay flat again. Looks like I still have a little solder there we can close this up with. Remove any excess solder here. It's pretty round, but it's also kind of wavy, so I'm just a little unwaving here. My flat nose pliers. That's not terrible. I've never seen this stuff before. It's kind of handy for figuring out angles on stuff. Since I got a 3 here, and I need to go 60 and 60 and 60, I think, if I remember right. Where's it? Let's see. That's 180. So 120, 120, 120. So we'll make the top one right there, and then 30, 60, 80, or 90, 120. So right here. And then you go 30, 60, 90, 120. So right there. So that'll give us kind of a point on which to start attaching these things. So I think I'm going to put the big one up top here, and then put these two facing inwards like this. See if I can't get that configuration to look pretty good, even though these stones aren't perfectly symmetrical. That's not bad. I think I'll be okay with that one. Looks like we still have some solder here. So let's flux that and solder those together. If you're not familiar with PIC soldering, I have found that it's one of those things that really improved my skills. So I've never done it. I might consider learning how to do it. It allows you to place solder really precisely and exactly the amount you want once you've kind of figured out the tricks. So I'll put a link up here if you want to see my video about PIC soldering. I think I'm going to make some balls to add as decorations for this. And I'm going to have them tapering down size-wise and getting closer to a point as you go inwards. And then I'm going to add a hinge bail on the top, I think. So we need to make some balls. Let's start with some little tiny ones. Not that size. I always make an extra one or two. That way, if one isn't quite exactly the same size, a backup. Or if you screw up and you need a backup. You don't ever want to grab your balls while they're red hot like this, or actually I waited till they were black, but if you grab them while they're red, they'll kind of squish, sort of. So, alright, so this is pretty small ones. Let's do some slightly bigger ones. I'll do a few more that are a little bit bigger than those. I need 3 tapered lines of balls. So I do this, the next one down, try to get those straight as I can. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and solder those in, and then we'll see how it looks. See how that looks now. I like the openness of it. So I'm going to make a hinge bail up top here. So I should be able to just get a flat enough spot by filing the very top of this a little bit, and then we'll solder a tube to it. I'm going to use this kind of tube that a 14 gauge wire fits in perfectly. Let me find a little piece of 14. See, 14 gauge fits right in there, so that'll make a nice hinge. So I'm going to cut off a piece a little bit longer than that, probably about right right there, and then I'll cut off a little bit shorter one to attach to the bail here, and then we'll make the bail probably. Okay, I cut a couple of tubes there. I need to file a flat spot on the outside of the circle a little bit, right above the top stone. And I marked it so I wouldn't, accidentally do the wrong side, because I have a tendency to do things like that. So, and I want to get it to where it's nice, straight, flat edge up there, because for it to do well, we need a flat enough space to solder this tube all the way down the length of it. And as it's a curve, we wouldn't be able to do that as it is. I'm kind of trying to gauge whether I'm keeping it, straight, horizontal to that, and I'm close, but I think we need to go down further on this side just a little bit. That looks pretty good, actually. I'm going to solder that on. Don't need all those extra balls now. Okay, so for this guy, I'm going to sweat a little bit of solder on the outside so that it's already where I need it to be. I'm going to pick up these tubes too tightly when they're hot because you can squish them. There's a lot more mass in the piece than there is in this tube, so I'm going to mostly focus the heat on the piece. Okay. Looks like it's on pretty good, straight. Take these and smooth up the edge a little bit. Let's make sure we can still get this through the tube. If you can't, it typically means some solder flowed into the inside of the tube, and then that's a problem. So you'll need to cut the tube off and start over with the tube anyway. Alright, so let's make a bail. Use 22 gauge or 26 gauge sheet, and then for the borders I'm going to put some 22 gauge wire. In order to get it into that shape though, let's see, I need a piece of sheet about, not that wide, about an inch long, like I said. Alright, so I need two pieces just a little bit longer of this 22 gauge wire. Okay, so I'm going to straighten these out first, and then I'll find the center point. If you want to check to see how close to the center you are, you can just flip one of them around and line up the center points again and see how close the ends are. Pretty close. Good enough for what I'm doing. I'm going to curve it gently. Close enough. Okay, and then in the middle I'm going to bend them back the opposite direction. Just slightly. So I'm basically going to solder them down like this. But in order to do that, I need to sweat some solder onto these wires first. So let's do that. Okay, I need the old flux on there, and then I'll position these guys. Now I'm just going to solder these guys down by heating it. Okay. I should be able to just trim off the excess here. File this down. So I trimmed this off a little bit, and then we're going to use the bail making pliers, I think, is what I usually do to kind of shape this into a teardrop shape. Do that, and then usually use the smaller one to kind of bring it together like that. I'm going to try and get my these two ends to push together a little bit. To do that, you need to bend the two ends inwards a little bit. Just going to put it up here. I'm going to sweat a little solder to the outside of this. Take a peek at this and see how it looks. Looks good from that side, I think. Okay. Now in order to cut these to fit together, color these purple. The Sharpie. I'm going to line this up here. I'm going to probably going to cut these right at the edge of the bail there. I'll cut those off with the saw. And then, once I do that, we'll come back and we'll measure exactly how to get it in the center here, so we get it pretty symmetrical. Be right back. Alright, use my file to kind of clean this up a little bit, make sure that we're symmetrical. Okay, so now I need to line it up so it's centered on the stone, kind of. I don't want to have it off to one side. My wife has a pendant I made a long time ago when I was pretty new at this, and it's one of my earlier hinges, and every time she digs it out I feel bad because the hinge is crooked on it. So I'm going to try and make this straight as I can. At least centered as I can, you know. I think that's pretty good, probably. So what I'll do is I'll cut this out. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it a little bit into the square wire here too. That way it gives room for that tube to rotate, this one here, when it slides in there. And then we'll just slide a piece of 14 gauge round wire and solder it in with some easy solder. It's one of the very few times I use easy solder is on a pin for a hinge, because we don't want it to flow all the way into the hinge, and so we reduce the risks a little bit of having other stuff reflow if we use a lower temperature solder. So okay, cut that out. Now I need to do a little filing to clean it up and get it just to the right size. Just cut it a little small and then file it to the right size so that we have a reasonably snug fit on our hinge here. Moving it back and forth to make sure it's got some freedom of movement there. So I'm going to heat this up and pickle it like this, and I'm going to try to get rid of any excess flux here because, like I said, I'm going to use some easy solder, which has a slightly lower melting temperature, and then I'm going to pick a little bit of easy solder right on this pin where it meets the outside tube there, and then here as well. And we want it to just flow barely enough to attach to that tube, but not really penetrate that seam or have any of these previous solder joints remelt. So it's kind of a delicate operation. It's one of those things. I used to have about a 75% success rate. I think I'm a little better than that now, but this looks like a nice tight hinge. So once we get that soldered in, we'll cut this off, let it really pickle for a while, and then set the stones. So let's let this clean up in the pickle for a while. Now I'm going to try and solder this guy together. Like I said, I'm going to use easy solder for this last solder joint, which is one of the few times I ever use it. This piece I bought, I think I bought a ½ ounce about 25 years ago. This is what's left of it. Pretty tarnished. It's hard to see them. A few times I'm going to dab a little solder on, or a little flux I should say. It's a toothpick. Gotta get everything a little hot, and then we'll focus right in. Still got movement. Looks like we got some solder flowage. So I'm going to snip those off. Leave a little bit sticking out, and then I'll just kind of smooth them out with the Dremel later. But right now I'm going to let this pickle, and then the next time you see it, it should be finished. So let me get that pickling nice. Alright, so I did most of the polishing. I'll have to do a little cleanup polishing on the outsides of the bezels here with the rotary tool. But I already set 2 of them just because there's 3 of them, and I thought I'd just show you one. And so I cut some tag board to about the appropriate height for where the bezels are at. Bend this up slightly just so I have a little better access to it. And a lot of people use different tools like a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool. I just use the flat side of the needle nose here and the rounded outer part here. And we're going to start by just pushing the excess bezel up against there. There shouldn't be too much. Once you start getting it tight up against there, then you can start rolling it over. Quite a bit of pressure. And once you're tight up against there, then we're going to do the last stage, which is called burnishing. And that's where I'm just going to rub real hard right where the 2 come together. And that just kind of smooths out and lays down the bezel the rest of the way. That's the pendant. So I'll take some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was a 3-stone Larimar pendant. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I had a good time making it. And you know, before you leave, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps out a lot. And you know, if you have suggestions or comments or ideas for videos, I love to get those kind of things in the comment section down below. So you know, I like to hear your input and what you guys would like to see. I'm approaching 200 videos now, so if you haven't subscribed yet, it's a really valuable resource, I think. I've got lots of variety here, tons of project ideas, quite a few technique things, and just generally a lot of material to look over. So check out a few videos, subscribe to my channel, you know, check out the video description for some of the links and that are relevant to my content, and thanks for coming. You know, happy silversmithing. Take care.